Yo, people, welcome back to another video, and it's the T20 Cricket World Cup Round 4 review, Round 5 preview. Last chance for some, and for others, it's just playing for pride. Um, but yeah, we will get into all the games and what happened, and yeah, money. How's the day been so far?
Yeah, the day's been okay. I mean, obviously, rain has played spoil sport for me in many ways. Thankfully, it didn't really affect that much of the cricket that was played today because there were a few showers in Sydney, and then, um, they cleared and the game was played to a conclusion. But sadly for me, I'm in a situation where I need to have a stabilizer for my PC. Without it, I get cut out immediately, and my misguided attempts at trying to cover the second innings proved to be futile. It was a match for which I couldn't see the first innings, regrettably, because of some issues with the TV. It was being used by someone else who shall not be named, so that I can legally say that that person was an absolute killjoy, a spoil sport, and utterly mindless, to be mild. But I did see the second innings. Obviously, South Africa chasing what ended up being a very, very competitive total. And it looks as though the trend has been that chasing under the lights in the second innings has proved to be more often than not very difficult. And the last 3 days have produced some really terrific games. Terrific in the sense of, um, the excitement that was obviously brought about. I was over the moon when England beat New Zealand, and yesterday we saw a shock result with Zimbabwe falling to the Netherlands and India beating Bangladesh, not without controversy, it must be said. So, following these matches, watching them and providing coverage has been terrific so far, and I am looking forward to this final round of games, which will promise no shortage of drama.
Yeah, definitely. Um, but yeah, first we will discuss the games and how we felt of all the games and giving a quick review of all the games. So it started off with Australia versus Ireland. Of course, we didn't watch along to that. And Australia, yeah, batted first, won the toss, decided to bat first. Australia uh, puts up a good total of 179 for five, and then which was led by the captain Aaron Finch, but we can say he definitely didn't look completely in control. It looked like he was trying to find form, but just couldn't quite get going. But he hit some massive sixes and played a brilliant innings for his country. And then, of course, we look at Ireland. They just, by the first over, it was a comedy choke. There was the one, yeah, Manias. Yeah, what is that? Yeah, this
Yeah, this is
is,
this is the scorecard for the Australia
yeah,
Ireland game that you're mentioning. So we see
just
here,
me.
as you said,
Mhm.
yeah, you were saying?
Can you just scroll down below for that Ireland player who done good? What's his
Yes,
name?
Lorcan
Oh
Tucker.
wait, yeah, he performed well. He showed real class. Also, and I think he's one of the bright sparks for Ireland this tournament so far. Because last time they went to the T20 World Cup, well, last time they were in contention, and he was water boy. So um, yeah, now he's starting, but overall good one for Australia. Um, one worrying point for them is still that the batting and that the bowlers can be gotten at, and that's one big worry for them. But Mani, what did you make of this match?
Yeah, I mean, Obviously, Ireland couldn't really hope to repeat their shock win over England with, thankfully, the rain holding up well. Both teams, in fact, ended up having an attempt at playing their 20 overs, only for Ireland to get bowled out with about 11 balls remaining. And obviously, Australia were motivated for this game, and it was wonderful to see, Finch scratching around at first, as you said, but somehow finding a little bit of form eventually. And the partnership he had with Mitchell Marsh after David Warner once again failed at the top of the order certainly stabilized things. And even with and there was also he also had another terrific partnership with, I believe it was Marcus Stoinis, who followed up his tournament leading fastest 50 with another useful little knock. But the day obviously belonged to Aaron Finch with the bat. And so, as long as they were able to bat first and keep their wickets in hand, they were always going to post a very good total. And 179 for 5 ended up proving to be quite competitive, certainly competitive for the Irish batsmen who never really got going. Two shining lights under the muck, if you will, with regard to the bowling were Josh Little and Barry McCarthy. But sadly, many of the other bowlers, Mark Adair in particular, were very errant with their line and length. Simply couldn't keep to a consistent enough line to trouble the Australian batsman. Adair in particular, very nearly going for 60 in his 4 overs. And so, when you have a situation where, as you said, the bowlers can not only be got at, but also um, this game, they weren't able to maintain that line and length, which is so crucial in T20 cricket. You're pretty much handicapping yourselves in that respect. And then, of course, once we take a look at the Ireland's chase, once Sterling and Balbirnie were taken out quite early, it was really a question of when, really, because again, even afterwards, Harry Tector not really doing that well. And of course, a real highlight early on in that innings was Mitchell Starc finding swing to bowl both Curtis Campher and George Dockrell, reminiscent of that brilliant spell from Wasim Akram against England in the 1992 World Cup final in Australia, where with those two deliveries dismissing Alan Lamb and Chris Lewis, he effectively kneecapped England's chase. And so, with those wickets falling, Dockrell specifically falling with the score 5 for 25, it was really game over at that point. And then it was, of course, an attempt to salvage a bit of pride. Tucker stayed unbeaten near the end, anchoring the innings in a way magnificently. And he had some decent support from Delaney and a few other batsmen who, chipped in with a boundary or two, but pretty much helped uh, helped Tucker farm the strike for himself so that he could continue on his merry way. And 71 or 48 was a brilliant innings, almost 150 strike rate, 9 4s in that innings. But again, it was a question of Australia, sticking to a game plan, executing it very well. In the end, the margin of victory was never going to be too small. A 42-run win doing wonders to help their run rate, although their run rate is still quite negative. And again, the bowlers being rotated quite well. Maxwell, of course, his part-time spin doing a job taking 2 wickets for 14 when he was bowling around the wicket. He obviously wanted to cramp the right-handed batsman, prevent them from playing any shots. Hazelwood looked a bit expensive. Cummins did pick up a couple, quite expensive. Mitchell Starc, interestingly enough, started off his innings with that double wicket maiden where he bowled those 2 beautiful deliveries, but after that was smashed all around the park in the end by Tucker and company. And then 2 overs of more than decent leg spin for Adam Zampa, who was able to prize out a couple of lower order batsmen who were briefly threatening to pull off some kind of a miracle, although the fight back was never really on. So a good performance from Australia. They're recovering, but they still have a problem of a net run rate. And the washout against England didn't help them. And they go into the final round of matches, of course, in Group 1, knowing what they need to do, but also by how much they need to do it. Hannah, are you there?
Yeah, yeah, I'm here, I'm here. So yeah, um, definitely Australia. Um, they need crucial one for them, and they move on to, of course, their match this weekend or tomorrow. Well,
Hmm.
versus I believe who is, uh, versus Afghanistan. Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
I got them for a sec. Afghanistan. So yeah, but that was the only match on the Monday. Before we get into the other matches, we'll first look at the comments. KFC delivery, be up yourself. He says hi KFC. Be up yourself. How is it going with you? Oh, yeah. Uh, let's get now. The next match was, of course, an early game. um, we won't talk about it much as both me and I think both me and Mani didn't see or watch it. Was Afghanistan falling short of getting their victory over Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka chased it down quite easily at the end, and it was tight, but with 9 balls remaining, in that match before as I got to 148. The target was 144, 145. Sorry, Afghanistan got 144. Um, Sri Lanka they won by 8 wickets. Wicket, good match, good win for them. It keeps them in contention for the semi-finals. But yeah, Money, just your overall feeling about this match?
Well, I did see a few highlights of this game, and I think what was quite apparent was that the Afghanistan batsmen were never really able to completely get going in terms of being able to form really big partnerships. I believe there was an opening partnership between Usman Ghani and Ramanullah Gurbaz at the top of the order, which threatened to get going. And obviously, they were hitting quite well, decently well during the power play. At the end of the power play, they were 42 without loss, but then ended up losing Gurbaz off the first ball of the sixth over after the power play. And then the story at the of the innings was basically um, the top three batsmen getting a few starts, not quite able to consolidate on them, and the more heralded batsmen, the likes of Najibullah Zadran, Gulbadin Naib, and Mohammad Nabi coming down in the middle, never really got going either. And it was a case of more wickets falling, and probably not too much in terms of very heavy wicket hauls. I think the Sri Lankan pace bowlers and spinners looked quite economical. Special mention, of course, to Hasaranga de Silva, Wanindu Hasaranga, who got bowled 4 overs for 13 and took 3 wickets. He was adjudged the player of the match because he was able to tie the batsmen down, prevent them from getting their shots in, and ended up taking a few wickets near the end. You can see that he had, obviously, he got rid of Usman Ghani and got rid of the lower order batsmen near the end. Didn't really prevent them from, he prevented them from playing their shots, and obviously they weren't able to hit out in the final overs. And the result was effectively that the total that they posted wasn't quite enough. So again, with Sri Lanka, it was just a matter of how long it would take for them to get those runs, and it didn't take long at all. They took the best part of 18 overs with about 9 balls remaining. Wouldn't necessarily say it was tight because once they got the partnership they needed, they were always it was always going to be um, it was sort of a foregone conclusion. Obviously, the early departure of the opener Nisanka didn't help, but then there was a good partnership for the third wicket between Asalanka and Dhananjaya de Silva, who was, of course, the star with a fine innings of 66 not out of 42 balls with 2 hits over the rope and 6 along the ground. And then Although they did lose a fourth wicket with the score of 142, it really was only delaying the inevitable, and it was only a matter of time before that match was concluded. And a big scare, of course, was an injury to Rashid Khan near the end, where he worryingly sort of took a bit of a tumble and probably hurt his knee. I think word from the Afghanistan camp is that it hopefully shouldn't be serious and that he should be fine to play against Australia. And pretty much sums up Afghanistan's tournament, really. All guile, great deal of effort, but not really that much in terms of quality to enable them to mount a serious challenge for um, the tournament. And I think it's fair to say that it was pretty much expected that they wouldn't make too many inroads, but the best they could do was try and hope for a shock or two. And certainly they had England in all sorts of trouble before a sort of a gritty sort of recovery ended up taking England over the line by 5 wickets. So certainly some guile, but guile only gets you so far. And such a shame that the Afghanistan-Ireland match, which would have decided who would finish higher if those two, was washed out. And with Ireland beating New Zealand, I think it's fair to say that Afghanistan would end up getting nothing. But decent match, nothing much to do about it, but still good fun all the same, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. KFC, you're right. Yeah, I'm good. Money, you question
Me?
there for you about KFC.
Oh yeah. If KFC, tell KFC I'm doing all right, and just want to thank him, of course, for always supporting our cricket streams. It's not necessarily easy to bring this sort of coverage, and doing a watch along for a cricket game has to be done carefully because we don't have too many cricket fans who are following us. But KFC is a consistent one, a real one. Big up to you, and thanks for your support.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we're growing the cricket fans and community. So definitely. Now, of course, the big match, one of the matches of the week, you could say, was England rather comfortably defeating New Zealand. I don't know how they did, but I didn't see the match the whole way through. But of what I know now, that England are New Zealand's bogey team. England are New Zealand's bogey team. Just how it is. But great innings by Josh Butler. Of course, he was dropped by Kane Williamson, I think on 8 runs. Then he just took the innings in his own hands and decided this is what I want to do. This is what I'm here for, and I'm going to show off of what I can do in this tournament. And then of course New Zealand really didn't get going, but it's understandable. Of course, Kane Williamson uh, and what they Kane Williamson got in early and scoring 40 or 40 runs and not really being explosive, and then Glenn, Phillip, Glenn Phillips, of course, doing well, but just the wickets falling on the other end. Him being on non-strike, we have seen so far this tournament that it's been really interesting that so many of the players is when it's a set batsman, they just give the wickets away at the other end, and then the set batsman is down at the striker's end. So, yeah, but Manny, of course, you watch along. Of course, your team won, England won. You're buzzing. Um, until Sunday, you're not buzzing. Sunday after Sunday, you're not buzzing. But yeah, um, what happened? Tell us. How happy are you?
Well, first of all, let me say well done to Josh Butler. It was his 100th T20 international for England, and he couldn't have picked a better time to get back into form, win the toss, and make the brave decision not to chase but to bat first. Because the trend, of course, has been Hanno. that in all of these night games, chasing is not really an option. Of course, South Africa were able to buck that trend quite magnificently. They didn't really have any difficulties. India, of course, did beat Pakistan while chasing, but it has to be said that Pakistan choked in that game. And yeah, so obviously after winning the toss, he made the decision to bat first, and he did actually scratch around a little bit at first, trying to feel his way in. But I mean, in comparison to Hales, he was trying to feel his way in. But Hales and Butler made the conscious decision to go after the fast bowlers very quickly. Trent Boult and Tim Southey have been by far the best opening bowling pair in this tournament. And when you take a look at their final analysis, they were hit for 83 runs off their combined 8 overs. Absolutely brutal. Three sixes conceded by Tim Southey, mainly near the end. Boult was also hit for six and 4 fours. So Hales and Butler made the decision that they weren't going to allow Boult and Southey to intimidate them. And I think it was rather surprising and a bit sad in a way that neither Boult nor Southey were able to find the the swing or the movement that has helped them become such a lethal partnership this tournament. So when they got going, they had a magnificent partnership of 81, which lasted the entire first 10 overs up till the midway point. And then, of course, when the deceptively innocuous Mitchell Santner came on and then took Hales's wicket, it was a question of a few more batsmen coming in, not quite able to stay long enough to help build a partnership. Of course, Liam Livingstone came in and chipped in with another useful 20 to support his captain in a third wicket partnership of 45. And then afterwards, it was a case of losing wickets at regular intervals. But the damage had pretty much been done at the top of the order when they were able to flay the opening bowlers and scored a terrific canter. And it was a bit disappointing that after scoring so well, they couldn't really get to their intended pass score of 180. Although they were, I believe Butler said at the post-match presentation that 165 or 170 was more of a pass score, so 180 was a real bonus in that regard. It was a case of the damage being done at the top of the order, and by the time the bowlers eventually recovered well enough to, take a few wickets and sow some seeds of doubt in English minds, it was a case of it being too little, too late. So Boult went wicketless, which is a surprise. Lockie Ferguson enhancing his reputation as a partnership breaker, getting rid of Livingston and Ben Stokes, New Zealand-born Ben Stokes, mind you, but he was also smashed around the park. Santner and Southey actually were very economical, 48 runs off their combined 8 overs, so they were able to stymie the flow of runs quite well. Ferguson actually bowled a no ball in his innings, it must be said, but it was a case of the fast bowlers being hit around the park, wickets being taken a little bit too late, and you could also say that that England missed a trick by not being able to capitalize in the final few overs, because they simply allowed the spinners and the seamers to, completely dominate them with changes of pace and not really allowing them to get into any sort of a groove. But under the circumstances, 179 proved to be a really good target. And when it came to opening the bowling, the decision was made to open it with a bit of spin. Moeen Ali bowled first, and he conceded 4 runs off his first over. And then it was the case of Chris Wokes and Adil Rashid with more spin coming in. So there were 7 bowlers used in that innings, and Butler rotated his bowlers quite well, trying to bring on some spin in case he wanted to slow down the run flow, or bringing in fast bowlers to try and pick up a wicket or two. And what was interesting was that he gave Ben Stokes, the Test captain, of course, only 1 over. And his job, of course, was to get the wicket of the New Zealand captain, Caden Williamson, who, yes, it wasn't a very thrilling innings by any stretch of the imagination, but with both openers failing, and interestingly enough, prior to this match, Both Allen and Conway, who starred against Australia, ended up not really convincing in their next few games. So it could very well be that after one failure too many, one of them might be dropped, and Martin Guptill, the veteran, could perhaps be brought in. It will remain to be seen. But of course, losing Conway at the end of the second over, pardon me, it brought Williamson in, and he obviously had to play the anchor role. And then when Finn Allen also holed out, it was a case of Williamson coming in and settling himself. As long as Phillips, Neesham, and Mitchell were in the order, I could never relax as an England fan because I knew how dangerous they are. I knew that Phillips was still quite fresh from his amazing century earlier on in the group stage. And of course, when he came in, he started flaying our bowlers. And it must be said that the likes of Mark Wood and Chris Wokes were guilty of straying down the leg side and not sticking to the off stump line they wanted, and that's been a bit of a problem with a few bowlers in this tournament. We will talk about that further in subsequent games. But then once partnerships were broken, it was a question of taking wickets at the right time, and that's how it's proved. And that's how it proved. That 91-run partnership for the third wicket between Williamson and Phillips, mind you, could very nearly, conceivably, have taken the match away, because had they been allowed to settle and get to a century partnership, it wouldn't have been long before Williamson would have started to hit out. So bringing Ben Stokes on to take Williamson's wicket, it couldn't have happened at a better time. And then it was a case of the other batsmen coming in, Neesham coming in, not really doing very much. Daryl Mitchell also has to be blamed for dropping Buttler when Buttler was on 40. He had an opportunity to catch him a deep square leg, or was it deep mid wicket? I forget which. And he just dropped it. It came into his hand, didn't quite hold on to it, and he dropped it, and that proved costly. And sadly, Mitchell couldn't even contribute very much. If you see the substitute fielder Chris Jordan, who came on later on for one of the players who got injured, he also showed his value by taking both Mitchell and Phillips in the deep. And although Mitchell Santner did come in and chip in, once Phillips, Neesham, and Mitchell had gone, you pretty much came into the tail. And it was really only a matter of time. Of course, Santner can hit. He could hit. So the tail technically would have been only Southey, Ferguson, and Bolt. But again, it just goes to show that when you take wickets at regular intervals and aren't able to let partnerships develop, that can hamper any chase. And New Zealand's was no different. And obviously, with everything that could go right going right for England, it couldn't have come at a better time. Had they lost, they would have been effectively out of the tournament, and they would have had only themselves to blame for the approach they adopted earlier on in the tournament. But now they're in a good position. Now, all they need to do is beat Sri Lanka to give themselves the best possible chance, because their net run rate is still quite positive. I definitely do not see New Zealand failing to qualify in lieu of their magnificent run rate, but, cricket is a funny old game, and it might take an absolute freak set of results for New Zealand not to go through. It just goes to show that it can never be over until it's over. Hannah?
Facts. Dave from money can't be over till it's over. Yeah, I answered this question in the chat. Nope, and it's also said that as Craig has corrected you. Um, and Anu and Man, be up yourself, Craig, for joining in the comments.
Craig, it was a pleasure.
Yeah, yeah, and I see we got a new sub. Be up yourself. Someone in the one group chat I was just in. So, uh, one group chat I was added to. Um, just up to me, so be up yourself with that if you are watching. And yeah, but the next game was, of course, Zimbabwe falling short against the Netherlands. And the Netherlands in cruise control at the end of the day. They were controlling the whole game. So yeah. But what did you make of that game? Of course, Zimbabwe bowled all out for 177. Um, and yeah, um, just dominance by Netherlands, chasing it quite down easily. So yeah, what did you make of it?
Well, didn't get to see this because it was early in the morning for me. Didn't really have the time to watch it. But what can you say? The Zimbabwean scorecard tells the story. Sikandar Raza, top scoring with 40 off 24, three sixes, three fours, strike rate of 167. Sean Williams, the test captain, chipping in with 28 off 23, three fours. The rest, very sorry reading indeed. Nobody was able to get themselves settled in. And even though there were a few blows hit later on, it was too little too late. This is actually the type of game that the Netherlands are capable of playing. And ever since they've been involved in international cricket, they prided themselves on their bowling ability, being able to make sure they stick to a consistent line and length and apply enough pressure to, you know, force batsmen to have to play shots and make mistakes in order to get some runs. And the bowling attack says it all. Special mention for your former South African Roelof van der Merwe, who's now playing for the Oranje, and he will be playing against South Africa. That will be a match to savor for him, and maybe for you. You might be considering him a Judas of sorts. Hannah?
Sorry,
Yeah.
my
Well,
mic
anyway.
was off. Yeah,
Yeah.
nah, he did what he wanted to do. Didn't get chances. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Right. So basically, again, the bowlers really did their job in terms of. I mean, obviously, there were seven wides in the innings, so you could say that they weren't quite as accurate, but then some wides are of course adjudicated with very tight margins. And special shout out as well to Paul van Meekeren, again starring with the ball, 3 wickets for 29. He has been um, the Netherlands' best bowler. Everyone chipping in. Klassen with one at the top of the order, very economical as well. Brandon Glover with 2 for 29. Logan Van Beek with 2 for 17. And Bastien de Lede recovering from his concussion to pick up 2 wickets for 14. And basically, it was the case of, with the exception of the partnership between Williams and who has, of course, been their shining light, there was nothing in terms of contribution, and it was galling for me to see Brad Evans being dropped for Luke Yongler, probably to satisfy some sort. I don't know if it was to satisfy a quota requirement. I really don't know, but Evans has been impressive in this tournament, certainly against Pakistan, and we'll see how well Yongler did with the ball when we come into it. But again, this is Netherlands at their best with the ball. Very accurate, very relentless with the pressure they apply. And the Zimbabwean batsmen simply didn't really have an answer. It's a case of, once again, depending on a few established players to bail them out. That four over there of Irvine, Chakabva, Williams, and Raza, they're the ones who invariably, get Zimbabwe into the best of positions, and the other ones can chip in and contribute. But this time around, it wasn't enough. And of course, with the batting, it was a question of their expatriates who obviously came from places like Australia, South Africa, and England to add some steel to the team, doing well. Aussie Max O'Dowd, top scoring there with 52 or 47. With a target of 118, less than six and over, it was really only a matter of time before they would get it. And it didn't even need anyone going hammer and tongs necessarily. All they had to do was keep their wickets in hand, play some sensible shots, and with O'Dowd and Tom Cooper doing well, with a 73-run partnership for the second wicket, that's exactly what they did. Again, they lost a few wickets close to the end. Colin Ackerman not really doing too well, and Bastian Deleda chipping in but then holding out. The captain, Scott Edwards, also holding out. I mean, actually, Deleda was left undefeated, and he chipped in, so I stand corrected. And again, it was just polished, professional, and this is something that the Netherlands can take away from them because they are capable of providing shocks. I believe O'Dowd said later on that they wanted to have a few more wins, so they're a bit disappointed. But the thing about these associate teams is the inconsistency that they show means that they can never be expected to truly mount challenges for um, the latter stages of tournaments. One exception, of course, was Kenya, who ended up surpassing both Zimbabwe and South Africa to reach the semi-finals of the 2003 World Cup, the one-day international World Cup, which was held in South Africa, of all places. And the two games in Zimbabwe, obviously, I mean, Zimbabwe hosted a few games as well. So again, we take a look at the bowling from Zimbabwe. A lot of effort. Yongwe in particular was very expensive. 4 boundaries conceded by him, 3 wides and a no ball, not justifying his selection at all. I believe that Brad Evans will be brought back. 2 wickets each for Ngarava and Muzarabani. Williams and Raza going wicketless. So again, it was a case of Zimbabwe not being allowed to perform to anywhere near the best of their ability, and they simply were ambushed by a very professional Dutch display. So, with a negative net run rate, even if they were to pull off an absolute shock and beat India in their final game, they will not do enough to be able to qualify unless it will be a huge win. So I think Zimbabwe will also look back on their tournament as a big what if. Yes, they had to play the qualifiers to come through, but I'm sure they were hoping after their win over Pakistan that they would do a lot more in the tournament, especially given the prospect of playing the Netherlands and other teams. But then the loss to Bangladesh also set them back, and they also have to play. I mean, the washout against South Africa could have helped them, but now I think they've pretty much shown that while there is a lot of talent, they also play good cricket in patches. They're also not very, very consistent. But maybe if the political situation continues to improve, maybe if more and more experienced players come back and play, who knows? A large number of these players are very young, and the likes of Irvine and Williams won't go on forever. So the only question is, will there be more people willing to return to Zimbabwe? I believe the former England batsman Gary Ballance has been vocal about possibly wanting to return. Maybe we'll see him in the Test team. But now, this was a case of a competitive match between two teams, one of whom had dreams of making the semi-final, the other one just hoping to play their part in this tournament. And I think that the Netherlands will go home with some measure of pride. Zimbabwe with some disappointment, but the realization that there does need to be a little bit more improvement. What do you say?
Yeah, completely uh, um, agree with that. Um, it seems like Wolf is in the chat, shaking my hand. I know your team lost. Um, Today we were poor. We were real poor. I had a gut feeling that we were going to lose, lose at the end. Leading to the match, I was thinking, we're going to lose, and we did. Of course, the rain helped Pakistan out. Oh, but yeah, just overall, just poor from us. But we'll get on to that game. Now, of course, the next game was another game that was um, affected by rain. That was India versus Bangladesh. Which, um, I think they bet. Uh, nah, we didn't bet. bat well today, or bowled well today. But yeah, um, so yeah, India versus Bangladesh, of course. Bangladesh was 66 for 1 or 0. After the power play, it seemed like Bangladesh were going to do it. Then the rain comes. Then the rain comes. Um, um, Lunt, Lunton does starts the innings just after the rain and he just slips all over the place. I think he slipped twice. Then he had to, and then of course lost his wicket. Um, and then yeah, he got thrown out. Unfortunately for him, and yeah, nothing really anyone else getting started for them. Of course, Sakib Al getting 15-ish runs, and not really anyone else contributing. Uh, Wolf says India versus Bangladesh, man of the match, the umpire. Because he's a bit salty. Because there were rumors that the match um, started with rain, of started with rain after, of course, the first initial break for the rain. So yeah, but Bangladesh that came close, of course, 5 runs off it, but just well done to them. They tried hard, but they didn't come out with victory. They're still in contention for getting the playoffs, a semi-final spot. So yeah, India they performed well. Got their runs, brilliant performance. Getting 184, just absolutely brilliant. The bowlers um, didn't did go for a few were smashed away, but a few weren't. It seems like the spinners are getting into the matches. So yeah, but overall again great from Ashdeep Singh from him. For great performance. Mani, your fault.
Well, I did see quite a good bit of it, and obviously it was good to see Rahul Lokesh play himself back into form. A theme in this tournament is that as the tournament has gone on, certain players like Aaron Finch, Josh Butler, of course, both captains, have been able to play themselves back into form after being out of touch earlier on. Sharma, of course, was disappointing, getting out very early, and when he got out, there was some hope. Of course, that hope was extinguished the moment Virat Kohli came into the crease. And we will obviously talk about quite a few controversial moments later on, but he studied everything, and with a 67-run partnership for the second wicket, only ending when Rahul tried to hoik it over leg slip and short third man, only to find the man. He had played himself back into form with a very good 50 indeed, but once again, Kohli was the star of the show, anchoring the innings beautifully. Another terrific partnership in terms of speed of runs with Suryakumar Yadav and Kohli. Yadav also playing a very breezy, blistering knock of 30 of 16. But wickets were falling again. Another consistent theme at regular intervals. After that, nobody really able to get themselves established or settled. And it was left to Ashwin Ravichandran at the end to smite a couple of blows and take India to what was at the time a very competitive total. And there was some controversy as well because Shariful Islam was brought into the team replacing Samia Sarkar. He was smashed around the park relentlessly, 4 sixes and 4 fours, 2 no balls, 2 wides. He looked completely ragged at the very end, and it wasn't easy for Hassan, who really only had 5 bowlers with which he could work, including himself. He did take a couple of wickets and also affected the run out of Dinesh Karthik, proving how important he is to the team and what an inspiration he is. But it was hard work for the bowlers. Hassan Mahmood picking up 3, but also quite expensive. Taskin Ahmed showing why he's highly rated with a brilliant economy rate. 15 off just 4 overs. He never really allowed the opening pair to settle, and it was in fact Mahmood who started the slide in a what would have been a slide by taking Rohit Sharma's wicket. So Sharma's also a batsman who needs to play himself back into form. So the team selection for this game was a little bit misguided in a way. Islam not really justifying his selection. And of course, Bangladesh had won the toss and opted to stick India in. So it wasn't really a well justified decision, notwithstanding the fact that they were able to prize away a few wickets close to the end and prevent India from getting that big total. Then, of course, when Bangladesh were batting, it looked as though they were actually about to run away with it. Liton Das came in, played magnificently for his 60 off 27, and he really showed the other batsmen how this wicket should be played. And what was really surprising was how Bhuvaneshwar Kumar and Arshdeep Singh, starting up, were bashed all around the ground. Mohammad Sami had to be brought in as first change. And again, the spinners came in and probably weren't too effective. Hardik Pandya as well was bashed around despite taking a couple of wickets. And everything was really going swimmingly for Bangladesh. And when the rain delay came, they were above the Duckworth-Lewis pass score. So had the rain continued, they would have won. Sadly, for them, the rain abated. They came back onto the field. And there were still some issues about the state of the outfield, the state of the pitch. As you mentioned, Liton Das slipping and hurting himself a bit. And the next ball getting run out back at the striker's end, trying to add the non-striker's end rather, trying to add 2 more runs to the total. And from there, it was a case of the new batsman coming in and not really being able to capitalize on that start, because once they took Liton Das's wicket, they started to smell a bit of blood. You could say that the other batsmen weren't quite confident. Hassan chipping in with 13, but not getting himself set. And of course, Shanto losing his wicket. But there was actually there was a little bit of hope after the fall of Mossadegh Hussein's wicket that Nur al Hassan, the wicketkeeper, and Tariq Ahmed would have possibly taken them quite close. And it would have been the case, but it was the experience of India's bowlers that pretty much told the whole story. Arshdeep Singh coming back from being hit around the ground to take the important wickets of Shakib al Hasan and Afif Hussain in the 12th over. And that pretty much broke Bangladesh's back in a way. And then it was a question of Pandya also coming back, and basically the bowlers applying enough pressure to not really let the Bangladeshi batsmen run away with it. So it was an exciting game in the end, and obviously the margin of victory was quite small. Bangladesh have reason to feel hard done by. And there are, of course, a couple of articles here which will segue into the controversy surrounding everything that happened. Yeah, Bangladesh accused Kohli of fake fielding during the victory. It was brought to the umpires, but one of the umpires said that he didn't see it. The wicketkeeper, Nur al Hassan, claimed that the on-field fielding, which could potentially have resulted in 5 penalty runs for Bangladesh. It took place in the 7th over of Bangladesh's chase when Liton Das played the ball towards the deep offside field off the left-arm spinner Akshar Patel. And as the left-arm seamer Arshdeep Singh sent in the throw, Kohli standing at point. He feigned a shy as the ball was going past him. It went unnoticed as neither of the umpires took any action. And it looked as though it was a bit of a wet ground, said Nurul, and there was a fake throw. And they were continuing to complain, and Cricket's Law 41.5 also saying that the deliberate distraction, deception, or obstruction of the batsman or batswoman is prohibited, and if an incident is indeed deemed to be a breach of that rule, the umpire could declare that particular delivery as a dead ball and award the batting side 5 runs. Now, obviously, if there was that serious an infraction, the third umpire for that day would also seen it and brought it to their attention. And this also segues into the issue of VAR being used in football. It's not the technology that's at fault, it's how the umpires use it. And I believe that it might have been brought to the attention of the umpires by the third umpire. And sadly, though, there is no means for the umpires to take a look at what's happening on video and make a decision for themselves. So that is something that might perhaps need to be improved. Maybe a little bit of the football aspect brought to the cricket in a way. And the replay, of course, could have been interpreted as an attempted deception from Kohli, given that Arshdeep's throw from the deep passed by his right hand at the same moment that he motioned a relay throw. It needed to be made by the umpires in real time about the attempt to deceive the batsman, the attempt to deceive the batters, rather than the batters actually being deceived. And this continues to talk a little bit more about the umpiring flashpoint, but I will say that with Arshdeep Singh being left-handed and Virat Kohli being right-handed, you know, the only I don't remember specifically seeing that particular incident and really thinking too much of it. I'm pretty certain that neither Kohli nor Arshdeep had any intention of trying to cheat the batsman in any way. Maybe it was a case of signaling from Kohli to try uh, to Arshdeep to make sure the throw was straight. So that could have been the case. And another flashpoint was right here. In the 16th over of the Indian innings, Kohli, believing Hassan Mahmood had bowled 2 bounces in his over, tried to signal a no ball towards the umpire Erasmus after top edging a pull to a square leg. Erasmus, in fact, did call the ball and then found himself standing between Kohli and the Bangladesh captain Al Hassan, who ran all the way from the cover region to talk about that. And it was a conversation that took place for about 90 seconds before eventually everything was resolved. Another incident coming when the umpires were approaching Shakib near the dugout about play resuming following that break at the end of the 7th over. And they were 17 runs ahead on the Duckworth-Lewis system at 66 for no loss. He knelt down by the boundary's edge to get a sample of the wet outfield, talked to the match officials afterwards, and although Sharma did join the discussion, Shakib's gestures suggested that he wasn't really satisfied with the conditions. Shakib told the umpires that the ground could get dry if they took a bit more time. Start when the ground is dry, according to the management, but the umpire's decision was final. They decided to continue when it was almost more or less dry. And of course, it did sort of affect the batsman in some cases, especially when it came to running and slipping everywhere. But say this, given how the Bangladeshi bowlers frittered away whatever advantage they could have had by bowling short, bowling wide, not sticking to the line, and not really justifying the captain's decision to field first, it would really have been in some ways a travesty of justice if Bangladesh had gone on to win. Had gone on to win, because for the most part, when India were batting especially, Bangladesh was second best. And although India did have a few wickets getting lost near the end, they looked clearly the better outfit in terms of the way they approached the game. If you see here, every single bowler bar one was hit for at least 7 or 8 and over. Shariful and Hassan in particular were really smashed around the park for a combined 104 runs off their 8 overs at about 13 and over on average. So it was Lytton Das who, of course, threatened to create a problem all on his own, but when he was out, nobody else was chipping in. And so it would have been really down to luck if Bangladesh had won, because India had shown that they were the more experienced side, and it would have been a travesty because they were, in my opinion, much the better team. Yes, there were some contentious calls and some contentious issues, but it's another reminder that unless you are able to make sure that you play well enough and really get everything working well, you can't complain about the umpires. That's nothing but sour grapes. They conceded about, when they were bowling, they were literally hit around the park. They never bowled a proper line. After Lytton Das, none of their batsmen, bar Nurul Hassan, were able to get any kind of a real start. I don't think they can have any real complaints about the result. They should be proud that they contributed to an exciting game. They gave it their all. They fought quite hard. And now, of course, with a negative net run rate, they will, of course, have to depend on a very freakish set of results to hope to qualify. At least they've shown that if they have a little bit more in terms of consistency, like I would say that they're much better than Zimbabwe in all aspects because they're still continuing to play Test cricket and doing quite well. But clearly, they need to improve a little bit in terms of consistency and make sure that they can really become a decent outfit again. And it seems to be the case that they are dependent on the likes of Shakib and a few other players. So if Bangladesh can improve and just take it as a sign they need to improve, they should be fine. And of course, with their last game coming up against Pakistan, that should be an opportunity for them to sign off on a high note and provide people proof of how good they are and what they have to do to try and get it right for the next tournament. As for India, well, had a bumpy. They were the better side today, but they also have to be reminded that they cannot afford another major slip up if they want to seal their spot in the semi-finals. Because, mind you, if they lose to Zimbabwe, the cat could very well be amongst the pigeons. What do you say to that?
Yeah, definitely. I agree with basically all of what you said. Um, and yeah, I can see that where Bangladesh are coming from. Yeah, definitely. Maybe they can be said there is some conspiracy theories. So yeah, uh, but we'll move on to who, which was today's game. Of course, was South Africa versus Pakistan. Now I'm going to get this out of the way. If the bed wants me to talk, but yeah. But before we do that, let's get into some of those comments. I want to, yes, Anu's bed thought. Well, you can hear it in background. Um, bed Sue. Sue. I would like to see Money commentate on uh, an Animal Planet episode. Money, your response to that?
I wouldn't necessarily mind that, but I think it would have to be a sort of a live action replay where I'm actually in the forest or in the jungle watching the animals themselves. So that's probably where it will be at. I certainly wouldn't fancy myself as the next Steve Irwin. No crocodile or alligator wrestling for me. Thank you very much. But yeah, I mean, like if something were to come up like that, wouldn't mind it.
Yeah, yeah. Shit. Now I'm going to start off. First off, Money, can you scroll to South Africans our bowling figures,
Oh, yes, the
please?
bowling. Yes.
Okay. Now you see, the lowest one is what 26 runs conceded. That was by Lungi Ngiri, which is absolutely appalling. I mean,
Is that 26 or 30?
uh, well, which one is the lowest? Which one is the lowest?
Well, the lowest is 31 by Wayne Parnell.
Oh, 31. That makes it even worse. Was disgraceful bowling today from our bowlers, which has been one of the positive as so so far. But our bowlers didn't perform, and you can see the bird agrees with me. He's shouting, or she, shouting crazy. Um, but absolutely appalling from us as bowling wise. And let me not start on the betting. No. Let me not start. Not. But yeah. Overall, Manny, can you scroll up to the betting figures of Pakistan, please?
Yes.
Um, you look the Mohammed Rizwan with a brilliant knock. Sean, and again with another brilliant knock, 52. And we were just all over the place, really. We got, I think the first 2 overs they got, or even in the power play, they got almost 60, which is absolutely appalling how they did that. And yeah, we were just all over the pitch. And our bowlers were poor, was poor, everything was just poor. And great bowling by Shadab Khan. He did really well for Pakistan. And yeah, we move on to the Netherlands. Unless our rains out and Pakistan's game, which is played the same Paki- at the same ground round and Pakistan won, then we're out. But I don't think it will rain. We just need to win. If we don't win, then we're in trouble. But yeah, no. Be up Pakistan for that. I had a feeling going into the match that Pakistan would win. Um, but yeah, one thing I want to say is disgraceful how the South African people chose that lineup. It's disgraceful how they could leave out David Miller. Absolutely disgraceful. If you're going to take out someone, why not take out Tristan Stubbs, who hasn't really been good? Take him out, put in Klaasen. No, take out Klaasen and put in David Miller. Is something wrong with in your head? Because that's a weird choice to make. David Miller basically single-handedly saved us um, from losing against India. Now you drop him. Absolutely disgraceful. Um, but yeah, that's my thoughts. Money, your thoughts?
Well, I'm glad you've asked me to give my thoughts because I will have to correct you in many ways. Let me start by
Oh,
saying that I believe Pakistan obviously got inspiration from England's performance because when Babar Azam won the toss, he made the decision to bat first and believed that chasing would be an issue. And it proved to be the right decision. And obviously, the South African team selection did cause some controversy, but I can tell that the decision to leave out David Miller was forced because he turned up with back spasms and could not play. So Henry Klaasen had to be brought in. And one decision was that they decided to drop the left arm spinner Keshav Maharaj and replace him with the left arm Chinaman bowler Tabriz Shamsi, who was who bowled okay enough, I would say.
and that
Actually,
selection
he
is
was
also disgraceful. That selection of Shamsi, that's absolutely disgraceful. How can you take out Maharaj, that's been so good for us this World Cup? Nah, they need to fix
yeah,
up.
yeah, and obviously with Shamsi coming the last man, I get your point definitely because it might not have made too much difference to the length of the tail in theory, but you're dropping an economical left arm spinner and a much better batsman for a rather awkward Chinaman bowler and an a perfect tail ender. And Shamsi, of course, was hit for two sixes and two fours. But the story of the Pakistan innings obviously was one where they actually were in trouble. Rizwan actually hit Wayne Parnell for four off the second ball, but two balls later ended up playing onto his stumps to get bowled. And Pakistan also had their injury issues with Fakhar Zaman being ruled out due to a knee injury. That actually flared up and got even worse. He was selected for the tournament despite carrying that injury, but it became worse and worse, and Mohammad Harris, coming in at number three, had to replace him. But it proved to be an inspired replacement because after being hit on the grill by, I believe it was Rabada who hit him on the grill, he ended up taking out his anger on the bowlers, smashing three sixes and two fours in his very entertaining yet brief cameo of 28, which wrested some of the initiative away from the bowlers at the time. But when he departed at the end of the fifth over with the score on 38, LBW to Anrik Norche, who was expensive but very, very effective. It was a case of Babar Azam also continuing his wretched run of form with the bat in the tournament, as with Mohammad Rizwan getting out in the sixth over. And halfway through the seventh over, when Shan Masood lost his wicket again to Norche, they were 4 for 43, staring down the barrel, and many of us were thinking, this is it, Pakistan's tournament is over. But if Iftikhar Ahmed, as with India, as with the match against India, had other ideas. He came in, played his usual anchor role, steadying the ship magnificently, and in the company of Mohammad Nawaz, put on 52 for the fifth wicket before Nawaz was out LBW, giving Shamsi his wicket. And that was also quite controversial because there was a belief that Nawaz had in fact edged that. And so if you edge it, you cannot be out LBW. But apparently he didn't recognize it. He didn't bother to ask for a review and he ended up walking away. So Shamsi's wicket was, in fact, very lucky. And I get what you're saying about how bad that decision was to pick Shamsi. It reminded me of South Africa in 1996, who had qualified for the knockout stages of that World Cup in impressive fashion, winning all 5 of their group games. But then they picked Paul Adams ahead of one of the more effective bowlers and saw Adams get hit a mark. And the West Indies, thanks to a century from Brian Lara, ended up knocking South Africa out at that stage of the tournament. So selections there pretty much not really being justified. But then, of course, Shadab Khan came in and he picked up where Nawaz wanted to leave off, and he really bludgeoned the South Africans for 4 sixes and 3 fours in his very entertaining 50 off just 20 balls. Lasted a couple of more balls, adding 2 more runs before holing out to Tristan Stubbs again off Nortje's bowling. And then after taking the wicket of Wasim and Naseem Shah and Rauf not really being able to add too much to the score, in fact, an interesting passage of play saw Shadab Khan, Mohammad Wasim, and Iftikhar Ahmed come holding out in the space of 3 balls. Off the fifth and sixth balls of the 19th over and the first ball of the last over, providing South Africa with a kind of team hat-trick, if you will. Obviously, Nortje was not going to get either his hat-trick or the fifer. With 4 wickets, but still quite expensive himself, as was Rabada, who was smacked around for 44 especially after coming back into the attack. Parnell also, that wicket of Rizwan aside, not proving effective. Shamsi, of course, not really justifying his selection. So it was a magnificent recovery from the Pakistan middle order, and it propelled them to a very competitive 185 for 9. There were, of course, a couple of drop catches with Aidan Markram, I believe, grasping a chance at long on. Thought he had caught it, but it ended up squeezing out of his arms onto the turf. And some pretty poor fielding as well in other areas. On one occasion, Tabriz Shamsi pretty much misfielding a ball and seeing it go past him in a different direction all the way to the boundary. So pretty poor form all around. But yeah, Pakistan recovered very well and deserve credit for that. And now we go into the South African batting, which I was able to see. Again, Tender Bavuma continuing the theme of batsmen and captains playing themselves back into form, using his short stature to get to the pitch of some hostile bowling. Aside from Shaheen Afridi, who was magnificent in his first 2 overs, taking the wickets, of course, of Quinton de Kock for a 5th ball duck, and also Riley Russo, who holed out to 3rd man. Those 2, of course, those 2 left-handers are 2 of the most dangerous batsmen in your team, as you know. But then apart from that, Naseem Shah and Harris were dreadfully expensive in their opening overs, and Bavuma was basically making hay. And especially when Aidan Markram came in after the fall of Russo, he helped put on a partnership of 49 with his captain. But then came Shadab Khan with his leg spin. First ball, back of the hand, spun beautifully, induced the finest of edges from the South African captain, carrying through to the wicketkeeper Rizwan, and Bavuma had to go. And from there, none of the other batsmen, not Klaassen, not Stubbs, were able to get in. And later on in that over, off the 3rd ball, Shadab produced an absolute beauty, sort of a top spinner or a kind of flipper, which went straight through Markram's defences and castled him for a decently made 20, another chipping in. And again, as you've said, none of the other batsmen were really able to make any kind of a contribution. Klaassen came in and played well for his 15, and Stubbs also came in, smashed a six, but didn't really last too long. And then it was as if, of course, there was the rain delay at the end of the ninth over when uh, South Africa were in a real spot of trouble, having lost those wickets and being well behind the par score. Had it continued, they would have lost. And when the rain, when play resumed after the rain, they had a revised target of 100 and I don't quite remember what it was, but yeah, 100,
142.
yeah, 142 off a total of 14 overs. So they had to score eventually at the rate of 10 and over, 73 off the final 30 balls. And when they came out, Klassen and Stubbs actually started proceedings well by clubbing a few bowlers around the park. I believe Rauf went for another 17 or so. And for a while, it looked as though they were going to get their way. But then Shaheen Afridi came back into the attack, snared Klassen. Then, with that increase in confidence, Mohamed Wasim came back and was able to get rid of Wayne Parnell. And then Tristan Stubbs also holed out, trying to play one big shot too many. And then it was all over, bar the shouting. And I suppose one disappointment was that they couldn't bowl South Africa out, but the margin of victory really puts them in terms of run rate in the driver's seat, because a win over Bangladesh will definitely do them many favors in terms of improving their record with their run rate, but they will still need a few favors. And you've been speaking about some possible things that could happen. Kudos, of course, to Afridi, 3 for 14 off 3 overs. Brilliantly bowled, stuck to a good line, never really strayed. And he had the batsman playing and guessing. Naseem Shah recovered from an expensive start, 14 off his first over to concede only 5 off his next 2. Haris Rauf as well was very expensive, but I think in his third over, he bowled the last over of the innings and didn't really concede very much. And of course, by that time, of course, it was the tailenders who were there. So he was able to get the wicket of Norche, and not really many runs were scored. There was a 4 scored off the final ball of the innings by Ngidi, but that was really only it was some sort of an evil consolation in a way. Mohamed Wasim chipping in with the wicket. Shadab Khan, of course, the star of the show, because that over of leg break, you could say, kneecapped the South African chase, because with Bahuma and Markram back in the pavilion, they lost their 2 informed batsmen. And obviously, Stubbs is inexperienced, Klassen being drafted in, they could feel the pressure. And that tale of Parnell and company, I believe the risk was justified against India, but against Pakistan, without David Miller in the team, it didn't really come out too well. But I do believe that if David Miller had been fit, he would have played. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened if he had played. Of course, as a left-hander, he would have been able to counter the leg spin of Shadab Khan. And maybe he would have found it a little bit difficult at first against the left-arm spin of Mohammad Nawaz, who at least could be happy to be back on the winning side. He bowled 1 over and conceded 2 runs. Miller could potentially have made the difference, and it was just unfortunate that due to back spasms, he had to drop out. But I will say in reply that for what it's worth, South Africa are in a very good position going in. And if we were to look at the tables now before the final
Wait,
round of matches.
I'll get that up. I'll get that table up.
Oh, you
Um, yeah, I got that. It's just
So I'm just going to stop sharing from my side, but can I see the table now?
Yeah, let's get into the table. So, let's see. So the first group, it's poised. Whoever wins, whoever wins. So look at Sri Lanka. Let's get up the games and then we'll discuss each game and seeing what needs to happen for each.
So
do you have? Just pull up.
Do you have the schedule?
Yeah, I have it here. Let me just. I'm going into it now. Now New Zealand play Ireland and Australia play Afghanistan. Now New Zealand, they're probably going to beat Ireland, which
Hmm.
puts them through, unless Australia does a madness and bowls out Afghanistan for like 50 um, to improve their run rate. That's all. Oh, um, but yeah. So New Zealand, Afghanistan starts off with that match. Sorry, New Zealand, Ireland. Um, New Zealand should win. I'm going to say um, a comfortable one. That's what I'm going for. But
Hmm.
money, do you think Ireland can do something and maybe stop New Zealand from entering the semi-finals?
Nope, I don't think so. I believe New Zealand will be motivated to recover from that shock defeat, as it were, to England. And obviously, that defeat injured their pride. And they will make sure that they do not show the Irish any form of compassion or mercy. And obviously, it remains to be seen what will happen with the opening combination because aside from Conway and Allen doing so brilliantly against Australia, as I've mentioned, both of them have pretty much flattered to deceive. So it will remain to be seen if they decide to drop either Conway or Finn and bring in the steady hand of the experienced Martin Guptill. Maybe for this game, Guptill could be brought in, someone who could play and at least hold his own quite well. Um, I mean, they look good against Australia, but haven't really done too much. But I think they will be determined as well to make sure that they put in a more professional display and not really give Ireland much room to breathe. And Ireland, of course, are suffering with the same problem that. Aside from maybe one person starring either with the bat or the ball, none of the other players are able to truly contribute that much. And so it'll take at least three or four players playing out of their skins, or even more, to see Ireland putting up any sort of a challenge. So this should be a very comfortable win by at least 30 runs, or I would even say 6 wickets for New Zealand. And this should seal their passage into the next stage quite comfortably and deservedly so. Aside from, playing aside from the game against England, they have been the best side in this group and they should have no problems qualifying for the semi-finals with their outstanding net run rate. It must be said.
Yeah. And now the next game is Australia vs Afghanistan. Australia would like to. So we in New Zealand, we're saying New Zealand are through. New
Hmm.
Zealand going to the semi-finals.
Yes.
Australia, they face Afghanistan. Net run rate of minus 3.304. They need to win, and they need to win big,
Oh yes.
real big,
Yes.
because England have the biggest net run rate, or not a big net run rate, but they have a good net run rate. So Australia, they need to bowl out Afghanistan maybe for maybe 60, 70 T,
Hmm.
and then they need to chase it like in 3 to 4 overs. Do you see
Exactly.
Australia doing that? Do you see Australia thrashing Afghanistan? Personally, I don't. But I'm thinking they will win easy. What do you think, Manny?
Well, it will be
Will
an easy win.
Australia
Yes.
get in this match? Will Australia get up the net run rate to above England?
Well, I think the best way they can really increase their net run rate above England's, which actually, I mean, the difference in net run rate between Australia and England stands at a rather whopping 0.851. So they will need to have a real cracker of a game where they play out of their skins. And I think the best way they can increase their net run rate would be to bat first, rack up a huge total, and then bowl Afghanistan out for a very paltry score. Because again, that will also add to their net run rate. And with the likes of Stoinis and, of course, Finch coming back into form and also finding decent form, Maxwell also being able to hit, they have the batsmen who can certainly help put up a more than useful total, especially if Afghanistan's bowling attack, for the most part, flatters to deceive. I don't think we can depend on Afghanistan necessarily bowling Australia out for a very low score. The best we can hope for them is to try and restrict them to a total of about 150 or 160, which isn't really necessarily insurmountable, but more than competitive enough for Afghanistan. And this might induce them into some sort of a false sense of security that they have the batting to help them reach that target. And of course, in terms of the bowling, obviously, Mitchell Stark has come back into form and their seamers are bowling very well. Again, it will remain to be seen whether they decide to stick with Adam Zampa with his leg spin or maybe bring in Steve Smith to increase the batting order, and Smith can also bowl some leg break himself. Maybe they see Zampa as someone who can definitely get out get the tail enders out. But Smith can also do more than turn his arm over. He can also provide some sort of variety. Maybe for this game, I don't see Australia doing that much change to their batting order unless they decide to give Timothy David a rest and bring in Steve Smith. I don't know if I can see that happening. But Australia should win this comfortably. And of course, Afghanistan do have problems. I did mention that Rashid Khan sustained an injury near the end of the game against Sri Lanka. So hopefully it's not a very serious injury. He should be past fit to play. And he might have a role to play in terms of being able to contain the Australian batsmen. So it should be a comfortable win. But if Afghanistan bat first, I don't see Australia doing too much to drastically improve their net run rate to put them above England. So they will have to hope that they win the toss, bat first, and put up a really huge score, and then look to bowl the Afghans out. And of course, the Afghans being coached by former England batsman Jonathan Trott, I'm sure he will be very motivated to ensure that his boys put up a more than decent performance against the Australians. Will they win? I don't think so. But they could make it difficult for the Aussies.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Um, Now we move on to Sri Lanka versus England. At the Sydney Cricket Ground, I've checked the Adelaide Oval's weather for tomorrow. It doesn't seem like it's going to rain. Sydney Cricket Ground's weather for Saturday, as it's saying right now, seems to be just a cloudy but won't rain. So can England? I think they will beat Sri Lanka, but you never know. Sri Lanka, they they have got what? I think they've got a just under that. Sri Lanka would actually hope Afghanistan could give Australia a tough match. Then Sri Lanka might try and beat England, and which puts them on 6 points. And hope Afghanistan do a miracle and beat Australia to qualify. But I don't see that happening. I think the English will beat Sri Lanka by comfortable, just comfortable, 10 to 24 rounds. And and as it stands, I think no, I believe England will qualify for the semi-finals, but in second place. So that means they would face potentially India and face India. Money, of course, it's your team. They play Sri Lanka, not an easy team. Who do you see winning?
Ooh, good question. I'm glad you asked. Well, certainly the interesting thing about England's campaign is that until the game against New Zealand, their batting has not really fired on all cylinders. I mean, Livingston has been pretty much there. Liam Livingston was, of course, their best batsman prior to the New Zealand game, and then thankfully Butler and Hales were able to, set that record straight in the most emphatic way possible. The biggest threat to England could potentially come from the Sri Lankan spinners, and I'm looking at um, Wanindu Hasaranga de Silva, who, of course, starred against the Afghanistan batsman with his spin. Because, of course, when it comes to spin, England traditionally still have this unhappy knack of losing wickets in the middle order and not being able to play that type of spin. But in this particular group, it's interesting to see that against having played against Afghanistan, I mean they were able to play against Rashid Khan. They struggled a bit, and then of course they had the washout against Australia and played against Ireland. They were able to effectively counter the spin from Ish Sodhi and Mitchell Satner from New Zealand, but the Sri Lankan spinners could very well be a tough nut to crack. I would like to see more work being done by the batsmen in the nets to counter that spin and make sure that they don't allow themselves to get, um, bogged down. But again, if Butler and Hales are able to play sensibly and display the absolute disrespect that they showed to Bolt and Southey, then the Seamers will be in for a tough time, and with that confidence could potentially filter through to the lower order batsmen as they take on the Sri Lankan spinners. With regard to the bowling, well, the fast bowlers are doing really well. Curran, again, being outstanding. But what was really upsetting when England bowled was how Mark Wood and Chris Wokes, among others, were just, you know, drifting down to the leg side and allowing the batsman to sort of pick them up there, whip them for runs over a square leg or fine leg or wherever, whichever leg you want, and get some very big runs. So the batsmen have got to stick to a proper, the bowlers have got to stick to a proper line and make sure that they don't allow the Sri Lankan batsmen to play. And obviously, with Dhananjaya de Silva coming into form, and even the captain, Shanaka, also capable of a big score, they will be two of Sri Lanka's batsmen to watch. And clearly, England will need to bowl well. England are in the happy position of knowing that if they just have to win really to put themselves in the driver's seat, because again I do not see Australia doing too much to eat into the net run rate difference between them and Jos Buttler's team. But of course, Sri Lanka are not a team who can be discounted, and England will discount the Sri Lankans at their peril. So certainly some players, as I've said, to watch from the the Sri Lankan side are, as I've said, Dhananjaya de Silva. Kushal Mendes can also certainly play well as as the batsman wicketkeeper, and Shanaka coming in later on in the middle. And then they also have a reasonably big tail with Wanindu Hasaranga coming in. And the bowlers also, I don't see too much threat coming from the seamers. So again, it's the spinners who will hold sway. But I still think that England should, at least in theory, have too much for them, and I definitely don't see them struggling too much because they will work on their game plan. And as long as they're able to win by any good margin, they will keep their positive net run rate. They should qualify fairly easily enough, and I think they will look to put on a performance, but they must make sure that they don't take anything for granted. So England to go through, I would say either by a margin of 20 to 25 runs or by 4 wickets.
Fair enough. Now we move on to the tastiest group. Of course, this game is also played at the Adelaide Oval again on Sunday, which, as it stands, there seems to be no rain expected. Now, the first game is South Africa versus the Netherlands. It's 2 a.m. my time, 4 a.m. for people in the UK. Um, but many think South Africa, all they need to do is win. It's a big game. Of
Yes.
course, Netherlands are the toughest
Yes.
opponent. Can
Yes.
they win it?
They should. They will look for a response from the to the chastening defeat that they suffered today, and they will want to turn their anger on their former countryman Roland van der Merwe and his teammates, and make sure that the Dutch do not are not allowed to get under their skin the way they got under Zimbabwe's skin. And certainly, if David Miller recovers from his issues, he goes back into the team, no questions asked. Either of Klassen or Stubbs will have to drop out. It is what it is. Shamsi will also drop out. Maharaj will come back. A big issue, of course, once again, will be the length of South Africa's tail. But when you're up against, the Netherlands, who, I mean, they are certainly sharp and incisive, and they proved that against Zimbabwe. But I don't see them making too many inroads into the South African batting. And of course, with Quinton de Kock and Riley Russo still dangerous, and Bavuma now back in form, it should be fairly straightforward that South Africa will either put up a good total or be able to restrict the Netherlands. And I've been impressed with Parnell's bowling and the bowling of several others, and Rabada and Ngidi in particular have been good. It was just that in this game, I think they started very well, but allowed themselves to be, attacked by Iftikhar Ahmed and Shadab Khan and company. But they're coming up against a Netherlands team where, again, the captain Cooper is also not Cooper. The captain, of course, for the Dutch is also not really in the best of form, and certainly with other batsmen like O'Dowd and a few others playing well, it could there could be some problems. And again, I don't see the Dutch cause Africans any kind of problems. Yeah, Edwards is the captain. He hasn't really been in the best of form, but there can be some good contributions from some other players. Bastian de Leyde can certainly have a role to play. But look, we can't really expect the Netherlands to cause the South Africans too many problems. This should be a comfortable win for the Proteas. 25 to 30 runs or 5 wickets. Hanno? Yeah, I think he said he'll be back in a few. And as I remember saying, um, this last round will obviously be the big test for many of the sides expected to do quite well. And as I was saying, South Africa shouldn't have too many problems with their um, their selection for this upcoming game. They will obviously try to bring Miller back in, or they will have to stick and twist with Klassen and Stubbs in the middle order. As long as Aiden Markram is still there, then that should be another bonus. He's played quite well. And the bowling, and as
Manu,
I said, the bowling, yeah.
sorry to interrupt, but I quickly need to go. Oh, so yeah, sorry about this. Just something came up, so I just quickly need to go.
Okay,
Um,
so I'll take it to the end. Okay.
yeah. But
Yeah,
my
that's good.
predictions: South Africa to win one comfortable. I think we should win it. I'm going to say I think Pakistan will turn up. I think they're going to win it. But we should be clear of Pakistan by net run rate.
Exactly,
Um,
you will be.
so yeah, we just need to win. Zimbabwe, India. I just quickly want to check the MCG's weather. Uh, Sunday, it doesn't seem like it's going to rain. So I'm going to say India, freshing one.
Absolutely, absolutely.
So yeah,
Well, thanks a lot
you will
for
take over. Cheers.
yeah, thanks a lot for hosting this and inviting me. Take care of yourself, and I will take everything through to the end. So that was, of
Thank
course, Hanno Trollip, of course, the co-host of this channel, the owner of this channel, and someone with whom I've enjoyed bringing coverage of the T20 Cricket World Cup. We will, of course, now go on to the remaining fixtures from the group stage, and I will talk about them right now. And yeah, as he said, yeah, these fixtures are coming up, of course. We've dealt with Group 1. Now, of course, there is Group 2. We then should be expected to beat the Netherlands handily. And then, of course, comes the Bangladesh-Pakistan game, where I believe Pakistan now have what could very well be their best 11, and they will come up against a wounded Tigers side, pun intended, who will be looking to set the record straight. And again, if we take a look at the table, again, we're going to take a look and see how the run rate comes into play. Again, Pakistan, of course, are now in third place with this run rate. They have a 1.17. But that shock loss against Zimbabwe is the difference between them being third and first. They have a run rate better than India as well. And certainly their crushing defeat of South Africa has put a huge dent in the South African net run rate, but it won't be really fatal to South Africa's chances. This middle of the table clash between two teams who have identical records will probably decide which of them might tension. With Bangladesh's negative net run rate being as bad as it is, I don't believe a victory over Pakistan will be enough to see them qualify. And of course, if South Africa were to win, they would be on 7 points and will already sealed their spot in the semi-finals. So neither of these teams will be expected to qualify, in my opinion. They will have to depend on some very freakish results to stand the chance of getting through. Pakistan could look, in theory, the side expected to win, and they should be able to win. It will probably be a tight game, maybe by 20 runs or 4 wickets, because Bangladesh will also be determined to play well. But Pakistan will have to really improve, and their opening partnership of Rizwan and Azam has been in absolutely wretched form this tournament. It'll be interesting to see if they decide to break up that partnership. Would that mean dropping either the captain Azam or the wicketkeeper Rizwan? I don't think so. I don't believe that'll happen. But the partnership will have to be broken. We might possibly see someone else partnering Rizwan at the top of the order. Maybe Mohammed Harris, who's come into the side, can come in and partner Rizwan with Babar Azam coming in at number 3. So that could be a combination worth considering. And obviously among the bowling, Shadab Khan and Afridi were magnificent against South Africa. Afridi in particular has been a shining light this tournament. But a worrying trend is, of course, that the other fast bowlers have been very expensive. And the spinners as well, Shadab aside, have not really been able to cause too much in terms of damage. So they will need to work on their game and make sure that they do as well as they can. With Bangladesh, aside from Lytton Das, nobody really got going against India. And of course, Nur al-Hassan did very nearly pull off an almighty heist, only for circumstances to dictate that happen. And I would expect Pakistan to win. As I've said, it will be a tight win. But again, even if Pakistan win, they will be on 3 wins and 2 losses. South Africa should be able to beat the Netherlands handily and end up with a record of played 5, won 1, lost 1 with 1 no result, which takes them to 7 points. And that leaves Pakistan depending on their former countryman Sikandar Raza to pull off a similar, a huge miracle against India at the MCG. And I think we can all agree that as disappointing as India were against South Africa, they were accomplished enough against Bangladesh, and they should be able to seal their place in the semi-finals with a win over Zimbabwe and end up as group winners, with South Africa being the runners-up and Pakistan and everyone else having to say bye-bye. And Pakistan in particular, as I've said, will look back on that shock loss to Zimbabwe and say that they only have themselves to blame for not being able to qualify. Zimbabwe, of course, after that loss, that defeat of Pakistan, had hopes themselves of going quite far. And had they beaten the Netherlands, they would be on a record identical to that of South Africa. But sadly, with their record standing at 1 win, 2 no result, they also cannot conceivably qualify. And they also don't really have the best of net run rates, although it isn't really that bad. So I think it's fair to say that by the time the group stage ends on Sunday, we should have an idea, at least in theory, of who the semi-finalists will be. From Group 2, it should be India and South Africa, unless any really freak result materializes. But from Group 1, it could be quite tasty. New Zealand are expected to go through, which will leave England, Australia, and Sri Lanka in an almighty battle. Even if Sri Lanka were to beat England, it would be very difficult for them to try and have any hopes of qualifying, because with a record of played 5, won 3, and lost 2, it wouldn't be favourable, especially in light of the no result that Australia were able to get earlier on when their match against England was washed out. England, of course, have their destiny in their own hands, and they will, of course, go into their game against Sri Lanka knowing more or less what they need to do. In short, they need to win, and depending, of course, on Australia's performance against Afghanistan, they will know how they need to win. And, of course, it could be said that Australia made life difficult for themselves with that dreadful loss to New Zealand and not really able to get the opportunity to do well against England. And they did get back into form well enough against Sri Lanka, but you also get the feeling that with the way they selected their team and the way they approached the important game against New Zealand, that again they will only have themselves to blame if they aren't able to go through. They do have a really, really good set of results to end their campaign. It will be up to them to see how they deal with it, but obviously with their net run rate being a huge handicap, they're going to have to play out of their skins, so it will not be easy. And New Zealand, they've looked accomplished, they've looked quite brilliant in all departments, just didn't have the best of days, it has to be said, against a motivated England team who are now back in contention. And I think it's fair to say that that performance is pretty much like Pakistan's against against South Africa today, brought England back into contention. And certainly England can dream about a semi-final spot, but they will need to make sure that they complete the job in a professional manner and leave nothing to chance. And it will be interesting to see what could happen if at the very end two teams have perfectly identical records. If England and Australia do have identical records and identical head-to-heads, I wonder how it could be decided. In the Champions League, we saw Benfica going above PSG to qualify as group winners owing to the number of away goals they scored. I am not too sure what will happen if Australia and England end up with perfectly identical records, including run rates. So that is something that remains to be seen. But for now, we can look forward to some more than decent cricket coming up over the course of this weekend. Obviously, Group 1 will see 2 games being played. Both should be more or less, one-sided affairs, quite formal. Saturday will be the big one, and then Sunday there's the triple bill with Group 2 being completed, with an India-Zimbabwe clash at the Melbourne Cricket Ground, the iconic Melbourne Cricket Ground, which will host the final. You can't find a better way to round off the group stage. And then there will be a break before the semi-finals. And then the following week, of course, we'll see the tournament come to a conclusion. So we've certainly enjoyed bringing you coverage of the cricket, analysis, watch-alongs, and maybe this is something we will look to do more of in the future. But for now, I'm really grateful once again to be in your company, and I'm grateful to Hanno for offering me the chance to do this with him. And we will definitely look to see you again very soon. I probably might be doing a watch-along for the second of the games tomorrow, which could very well be the Australia-Afghanistan game. That will, of course, have great implications for England's potential future in the tournament. And that's pretty much the way it will go. Until then, thanks a lot for joining in. Thank you to everyone who's come into the chat. Mystic Werewolf, Craig AFC, thanks a lot for coming on, mate. KFC Delivery as well. And we will hope to see a lot more of you when we do a watch-along very soon, maybe tomorrow, and certainly on Saturday. But until then, peace to all of you. Take care of yourselves. Have yourselves a good night. And on behalf of Hanno Trollip, this is Manny Thangadurai for the Coach's Corner saying, I am out.